Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
The President of the United States is now officially a subject of Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller's investigation, according to a breaking news report tonight in the Washington Post. One of the authors of that report will join us in a moment, Robert Costa. Your status in a federal criminal investigation is often clarified by your lawyers when investigators want to question you. As we know, Robert Mueller has been seeking to question President Trump for months now. And there are three possible status levels for someone prosecutors want to interview. They are witness, subject, and target. Witness is the least dangerous status. Target is the most dangerous status. Target is exactly what it sounds like. Witness means you have something useful to say but are not implicated in a crime. You're the driver for a limo service and you drove O.J. Simpson to the airport at a particular time, and it's very important to the investigators to know exactly what time you picked up O.J. That's all they want to know. They are not investigating anything about you, the driver. They just want to know what time you picked up O.J. That's the most innocent status. Witness. Subject is the middle status. Subject is more than a witness. Subject is someone whose conduct is being investigated, but at this time is not apparently guilty of a crime. But subject is a very dangerous status because when subjects go in to testify under oath, they sometimes become targets, because they end up giving prosecutors the kind of information that changes their status from subject to target. They could also instantly become targets of perjury investigations if they don't tell the truth under oath. So you don't ever want to hear that you are a subject of an investigation, because subjects can always become targets, which is the only thing worse than being a subject. Targets then usually become accused defendants, and so far in Robert Mueller's investigation, that usually means they plead guilty. The Washington Post is reporting tonight, in private negotiations in early March about a possible presidential interview, Mueller described Trump as a subject of his investigation into Russia's interference in the 2016 election. The Washington Post tonight contains other news that could be much more damaging to the Trump presidency. It is this: the special counsel also told Trump's lawyers that he is preparing a report about the president's actions while in office and potential obstruction of justice, according to two people with knowledge of the conversations. If the special prosecutor believes that President Trump committed obstruction of justice in the presidency, he might decide that the best way to deal with that is to leave it to Congress to consider as a possible cause for impeachment. And the way special prosecutors deliver their findings to Congress for impeachment is through a written report. The Washington Post has more. Mueller's investigators have indicated to the president's legal team that they are considering writing reports on their findings in stages, with the first report focused on the obstruction issue, according to two people briefed on the discussions. Under special counsel regulations, Mueller is required to report his conclusions confidentially to Deputy Attorney General Rod J. Rosenstein, who has the authority to decide whether to release the information publicly. They've said they want to write a report on this to answer the public's questions, and they need the president's interview as the last step. One person familiar with the discussion said of Mueller's team.
It is Wednesday, the 4th of April of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. That's right, folks. Hey, Trump's only a subject now. He's not the target of a criminal investigation, only the subject of a criminal investigation. And Trump is seemingly falling for every trap laid out for him, not only in the Stormy Daniels case, but this one with Mueller, too. Because Mueller wants Trump to sit down with him, tell him what he knows. Of course, Mueller will only be writing a report, and it will be up to Congress to decide what to do with this scofflaw. And we know where that's going unless we can do something in the midterms. And we know the Republicans are going to get a lot of Russian help because they're getting a lot of Russian help right now. Yep. And Trump has never heard of the Posse Comitatus Act. He thinks it's an Obama-era law because the Posse Comitatus Act happened during Obama. And since it's an Obama-era law, it has to be done away with because anything the black guy wanted has to be eradicated from everything. Everything. We have to get rid of the scourge of the black guy because he was, what did Trump call him? Cheating Obama? Cheating Obama. Got to come up with a different one. Nickname, Donnie. 2 scoops. Okay? Cheating doesn't really come to mind. Even if you're a spill-flecked lizard brain deplorable, cheating didn't necessarily first come to mind when ascribing a invective towards the black guy. I think some other terminology was used, the pre-Lee Atwater terminology, shall we say. I heard that a lot. Well, the YouTube shooter, the woman, everything that I was hearing sounded like it was a domestic violence situation that spilled into work violence. And, I would give the caveat to friends and family that, we're still early on here, but this is kind of the reporting that we're getting here, or at least the information that was able to be gleaned. And it turns out that it was a YouTube user who was pissed off at YouTube and wanted to exact their revenge. So that's kind of a workplace issue. Now, when I first started hearing that they couldn't decide if it was a terrorist act, when all of this evidence was pointing to like a lover's spat that went bad, that happens a lot in this country, by the way, I thought, well, the shooter's definitely not white if they're considering it to be a terrorist act. But she did come onto the facility, apparently, wearing body armor. And rather than a scarf, she was wearing a ballistics mask. The kind that they wear, that, the paramilitary wears. And so, boy, it could potentially have the trappings, at least visually, of terror. But she didn't want to be demonetized, and apparently that happened. And that's a weird story. And we got a lot of guns out there in the world. I was taken to task about apparently the AR-15 is one of the best hunting rifles in the world, and it only shoots a tiny little .22 bullet. Tiny. I don't know how it kills. And I tried explaining, first of all, I'm the one that apparently doesn't know anything about armaments, and that I'm disrespecting military families because people take me to task are military families, as if I'm not a military family. As if, growing up as a kid in Oregon, I had never fired a gun. As if, in my various forays into responsibility, I had to fire practically every kind of armament that you can name. I know very well how to fire a weapon, and I know very well what that weapon can do to the human body. And the AR-15 was not developed to be a rifle. It was developed to be a people killer. Oh, it shoots a 22 bullet. It's so tiny. Yeah, but do you know what a 22 bullet can do at velocity? And one that's designed to break apart at impact? Give me a break. The sound, the shockwave alone turns organs to soup. Well, there's a few solid pieces in there, but like soup. So, so apparently because I don't know enough about these weapons that I'm not naming them correctly, because an AR-15 is only a semi-automatic rifle. Oh, it might be fully automatic, but it's not a military-style weapon. It is exactly a military-style weapon. It is marketed as a military-style weapon. And I should have added at the beginning of this rant that this was all brought on because I was actually attacking who I call the gun runners and the war profiteers who convince people that they got to have a gun. And if a brown person can be scapegoated to get fear involved so that white people buy more guns, all the better. So I just jokingly stated that if somebody tells you that a good guy with a gun will stop a bad guy with a gun, that person saying that is trying to sell two guns. Because they have a vested interest in making sure. And I've given historical precedents of this strategy. I mean, our whole Western expansion was predicated upon the gun and fear of each other. So, of course, the gun owner, hunter types, military family types say, oh, well, we're not the ones. Why do we have to have our rights taken away? Bleh. Well, first of all, you don't need an AR-15 on the streets of America, all right? Your puny .44 Magnum can take care of you, I'm pretty sure. Well, this argument's not going away, but I still maintain that, and I know some listeners have taken me to task for comparing people's obsession with guns with addiction. But it's a behavior pattern that causes people to be obsessive. Let's put it that way. So it's like an addiction. Maybe I should find another term. Obsession doesn't quite give the gravitas that I'm trying to assign this behavior. Because people with this behavior are willing to destroy communities, friends, families, just like a substance that causes people, the need for it is just so great. They'll break into somebody's home so that they can fund their need for this substance. People will attack teenagers who survived a mass killing because of their own obsessive need to have the substance that killed those kids. Who does that? So I'm just saying, people are a bit obsessed with this gun issue, and because of that, we are now celebrating the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King's assassination, yes, by a gun. Oh, there was a person behind it shooting it. But the guy wouldn't have been able to kill Martin Luther King, except he was, I don't know, a couple hundred yards away, using a scope. Far enough away that, he wasn't right up on him, I know exactly where I was. Most people do. I was just a young kid. It was 68. I was 12. I was in a department store down in Rowland Heights, California. Easter vacation. My dad was at his office at campus at Cal State Fullerton. Hadn't heard the news until he got home later. But I was roaming around the store, whatever. We were kids. Place was close enough to get to on my Stingray bicycle with a banana seat. I used that bicycle to deliver papers for years. And the TVs were on back in the TV department. And I stood transfixed, watching the news of Martin Luther King's assassination. And I knew as a kid, I'd already experienced John Kennedy's assassination. I was in 3rd grade for that one. And then it was just a couple of months later, Bobby Kennedy got killed. So, what was the common denominator in all those? Was it crazy people? Yeah, I guess you could say that. But a gun in the hands of people that could perpetuate the crime. But it's okay. We all have a God-given right to be able to have a people killer. To kill people, I guess. What's on the menu today? Well, of course, that was Lawrence O'Donnell at the top, explaining subject versus target. And on the rest of the menu, in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Florida Congressman Carlos Curbelo is the first Republican to join the calls for EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt to resign or be fired. I actually think he's going to get a promotion in this administration because he's just the right kind of guy for the job. The National Park Service will rethink its plan to hike entrance fees after a widespread anger. And Trump's racist caravan lie is really an annual human rights march held every Easter season called the Stations of the Cross. After the break, we move to the chef's table where the 2020 Census citizenship question is spelling trouble in Texas, just as it was planned. And calling the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau the very definition of tyranny, White House Budget Director Mick Mulvaney demands that Congress gut the agency. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Such a long rant. We better get right into these stories we have curated for you here at the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we'll fulfill our protocol after the break. Why don't we do that? Well, Florida Congressman Carlos Curbelo is the first Republican to join the rising chorus demanding Pruitt's dismissal. And this is by Kyla Mandel out of Think Progress. And the news comes as the scandal surrounding Pruitt continued to multiply. In the last, 30-some hours alone, more information has come to light about a Capitol Hill apartment he rented for just $50 a night, including that it was used as a GOP fund for GOP fundraisers, and linked to an energy lobbyist whose firm represented a company that received EPA sign-off on a pipeline project. Yeah, the pipeline project and the company that was fined $60-some-odd million by the Obama administration for leaks and spills and blowouts. And what's more, Pruitt went around the White House to give a significant pay raise to an aide who served as the point person for Pruitt's housing hunt. Now, that is what might get him kicked out of this Trump administration, because he was told you can't give that pay raise, and he went around the White House and got it anyway, because grifters got to grift, and there's just no honor among thieves, and they're all thieves. Curbelo joins 20 other members of Congress currently calling for Pruitt to resign or be fired. And since coming to the EPA in February 2017, Pruitt has made headlines for expensive first-class travel, secretive private phone booths, and a close relationship with the industries he's charged with regulating. Now, there is an update. Florida Republican lawmaker Representative Ilana Ros-Lehtinen, who is retiring at the end of Congress, said in a statement, "I agree with my colleague Carlos that the EPA administrator should resign. When scandals and distractions overtake a public servant's ability to function effectively, another person should fill that role." Offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, of course. Will no one rid me of this priest? Well, this offering comes from Jimmy Tobias from the UK Guardian. I love their take on certain stories, and this one in particular. The Department of Interior said yesterday that it planned to revise a controversial proposal to drastically increase entrance fees at some of the most popular national parks in the country. The Interior Department Press Secretary, Heather Swift, said the Trump administration decided to rethink its proposal after Americans flooded the National Park Service with more than 100,000 comments, many of them sharply critical of the proposed surge pricing scheme. In October, the Interior Secretary, one Ryan Zinke, announced a plan to hike entrance fees as high as $70 U.S. at 17 different parks, including the Grand Canyon, Yosemite, Yellowstone, and Glacier during peak visitation season. Zinke justified the fee increase as a way to raise revenue and help the National Park Service tackle its roughly $12 billion deferred maintenance backlog. During the public comment period, the National Park Service received more than 109,000 comments on the original peak season fee proposal. Swift then wrote, "We've taken the public suggestions seriously and have amended a plan to reflect those." Swift would not comment on the details of the changes under consideration, writing that the plan was still being reviewed and not yet finalized. "It seems to be par for the course at the Interior Department to shoot first and ask questions later," says Aaron Weiss, media director at the Center for Western Priorities, a conservation organization based in Colorado, a state along the Rockies in the United States. "We are glad that the Interior Department is realizing what a terrible idea it would be to hike entrance fees. It would hurt American families and have a harmful effect on overall attendance at national parks, especially at such an increased level of cost." Many Americans shared the sentiment and in public comments urged the Interior Department to forego the fee increase. The National Park Conservation Association conducted a statistical analysis of the public comments and said it found that approximately 98% were opposed to the fee increase. Americans did not like this ill-conceived proposal from the administration, and they spoke out, says Emily Deuce, the NPCA's Director of Budget and Appropriations. Democrats on Capitol Hill, for their part, hailed the Interior Department's change of heart on Tuesday. The people have made their voices heard, and the Trump administration seems to be listening, said Raul Grilavia, the ranking Democrat on the House Natural Resources Committee. It was completely ludicrous to propose that the American people should have to pay higher entrance fees at our top national parks. Also that the Trump White House could make big cuts to the Park Service's budget. The good news is that now we have confirmation that the majority of people agree with us. Patronizing accents and impersonations are solely the property of the original patronizing impersonator and accenter, and should not reflect unduly upon other members of Netroots Radio or their fellow travelers. Okay, just so we're clear. All right, finishing up here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, is an article by Eric Bollert out of Share Blue Media. Now, Trump claimed on Tuesday that the situation along the U.S.-Mexico border has become so dire and so dangerous, he's going to send U.S. troops to protect it. Doesn't he know about the Posse Comitatus Act? No, he calls that an Obama law, an Obama-era law. Because it just happened to be the law during Obama's time. He has no idea about American government. And I keep telling you, he learned American civics in that crash course the FSB gives their useful idiots and dupes. Right there in the Kremlin, too. So, wallowing in an incoherent scare rhetoric about immigration, of course, sending troops to the border is all part of a renewed scare campaign about immigration. Teaming up with Fox News, Trump has for days been wildly hyping the idea that a massive caravan of would-be immigrants would soon be descending on the U.S. border. Brown people. Thousands and thousands of brown people marching as to war with us, the United States. And we have such weak borders. Do we? My God, this guy's an idiot. So Trump had tweeted out, the big caravan of people from Honduras now coming across Mexico and heading to our weak laws border had better be stopped before it gets here. But he's lying, of course. None of this matches reality. The annual caravan in question, which has taken place for years and most often without notice from the United States, has already stalled in Mexico, and there appears to be no plan for members to continue on to the U.S. border. There were reports Mexican officials were seeking to end the caravan, but it was for all intents and purposes over anyway. The participants, the Associated Press reported, were never equipped to march en masse to the U.S. border or anywhere near it. Indeed, the peaceful protest halted days ago in the town of Matias Romero in the southern state of Oaxaca, according to the AP. So no, there is no marauding mob, a massive caravan heading to the U.S. in order to swamp the border. Now, it should be pointed out that what he's talking about, a caravan of people coming up through Central America, through Mexico, this is not a new phenomena. It's almost a peaceful protest that's been happening over many, many years. In fact, 10 years, I should add. And in some ways, it's a human rights march. sheds light on the people of Central America and the very difficult condition that they're going through. The mass movement of people is known as the Stations of the Cross Caravan, and it's been held in southern Mexico for over 10 years. The event first began as short processions of migrants, some dressed in biblical garb and carrying crosses, as an Easter season protest against the kidnappings, extortion, beatings, and killings suffered by many Central American migrants as they crossed Mexico. But who else but Trump would try to take a Station of the Cross human rights march and turn it into a caravan of destruction? Indeed. All right, let's get to our break, and we'll come back and go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Have you noticed that Donald Trump constantly prefaces his outlandish lies with such phrases as, "to be honest with you," "to tell the truth," and "believe me"? Why? Because, like a snake oil salesman, he constantly needs to convince himself that he's speaking the truth in order to perform his next lie convincingly. The show must go on and on. In fact, he already ranks as the lyingest president in U.S. history, and that includes Nixon. Trump's biggest whopper is that he's an honest-to-God populist, standing up for America's hard-hit middle class against Wall Street, corporate lobbyists, and moneyed elites. This prevarication has duped many working stiffs into thinking he's their champion. The huckster doubled down on this lie in his inaugural address last year, pompously declaring, "The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer." That's why a new straight-talking pamphlet by the watchdog group Public Citizen is so important. It exposes the people's champion as a rank fraud who is pushed from day one to further enrich and empower corporate elites he had denounced as a candidate. Public Citizen's report documents with concise, easy-to-grasp specifics how Trump, the faux populist, has systematically sold out the working families whose votes he cynically swiped, handing our government to a kakistocracy of corporate plutocrats. This is Jim Hightower saying, it's not merely that he's an irredeemable liar, but that Trump himself is a lie. The Public Citizen expose is titled, "Forgetting the Forgotten, 101 Ways Donald Trump Has Betrayed the Middle Class," and it drives the stake of truth through the heart of his populist pretensions. Don't just read it. Use it like a Thomas Paine pamphlet to spread the truth. To download a free copy, go to corporatepresidency.org/forgotten.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
And this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day workers at the Hershey candy plant in Hershey, Pennsylvania, sat down. CIO organizers for the new United Chocolate Workers Union reported that anywhere from 2,000 to 2,400 workers were on strike. Hershey was a company town where streets were named Chocolate and Coca Avenue. Housing was built for workers, and the company funded public education and transit service. But the company also sought to monitor and control workers' behavior on their off time and showed favoritism in hiring and wages. The Great Depression created dire conditions even in the sweetest place on earth. Hours and bonuses had been cut. Workers grew increasingly frustrated with production speed-up and unpredictable work schedules, all while Hershey still drew handsome profits. The company initially raised wages after meeting with the union, but then laid off the organizers 3 months later. That's when the workers shut off their machines and occupied the plant. the company refused to negotiate unless the workers left. By April 7th, dairy farmers became incensed at the loss of income. They mobilized with anti-union company forces to storm the factory and drive the strikers out. Organizers had agreed to end the strike in order to resume negotiations and avert violence. But the anti-union forces attacked the sit-downers with bats, whips, clubs, and hammers. 3 CIO organizers were singled out and severely beaten. Governor George Earle condemned the attack and blamed the county sheriff for suppressing labor rather than preventing mob rule. The strike was smashed. Attempts to install a company union failed soon after. Hershey would be one of the first candy companies to be organized when the Bakery, Confectionery, Tobacco Workers, and Grain Millers International Union won recognition 2 years later. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labor.
This is a Radio Labor special report recorded on Tuesday, April 3rd, 2018. I'm Sumeri Ainsborough. The private school corporation Bridge International Academies has been dealt another blow as it attempts to privatize education in Africa. A court in Kenya has ruled that the company must close 10 schools in the country. Bridge International is funded by billionaires such as Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg and Microsoft's Bill Gates. Reasons cited for closing the schools in Kenya include not complying with the country's minimum education standards, failure to train teachers and managers, and inappropriate facilities. Wilson Soshin is the General Secretary of Kenya National Union of Teachers, the KNUT.
Bridge International did not have a substantive case to block us, and in the ruling, it's very clear that we have got the legitimate right to speak as a union that represents majority of the teachers in Kenya.
The court ruling to close Bridge International schools in Kenya comes after a similar ruling in Uganda. The Ugandan government has also told Bridge to close its schools because it is using its own curriculum instead of the one established by the government's education ministry. Rosemary Sininde is Uganda's Minister of State for Education.
So we have closed out Bridge schools because Bridge schools also follow in the category of those schools that we are not meeting the requirements. So for that matter, I want to make it categorically clear that not until any school, any private school, be it Bridge schools, be it any school, not until they meet the requirements will they be allowed to operate.
In both Uganda and Kenya, the move to close the profit-making schools was led by the teachers' unions with the help of Education International Global Union. Juliet Wajega is the Deputy General Secretary of the Uganda National Teachers Union.
We appreciate the support of Education International in the fight for all our children to have a free quality education, an education where we have qualified teachers, where the classrooms are of quality, and we hope that the government of Uganda will keep to its promise of having the schools that meet the basic minimum requirements and standards operating. And we hope the Bridge schools are able to meet these standards before they can let to operate in our country.
Education International is the global union for teachers and other education workers around the world. EI represents more than 32 million workers in 172 countries. Angelo Gavrilatos is the project director at Education International.
In 2015, at our World Congress, it was determined that Education International establish a global response to the growing commercialisation and privatisation in and of education. It was recognised by member organisations around the world that the threat of the growing commercialisation and privatisation of education was such that it put at risk certain fundamental beliefs that we hold as teachers. Privatisation is the greatest threat to the achievement of inclusive and equitable quality education and lifelong learning for all. Our analysis led us to the conclusion that we're dealing with actors, the size and reach of which we had not predicted, that were exerting incredible influence over education policy. And by actors, I'm talking about global corporations, edu businesses, seeking to commercialise, to monetise every aspect of education, seeking to commodify education, and therefore undermining the essence of education as a public good. This is a global phenomenon. We see a phenomenon of privatisation that is quite grotesque. We see privatisation taking the form of corporate actors wanting to establish chains of for-profit private schools, not to supplement education provision, but to supplant public education provision. Our campaigning has been to expose this, to expose it and halt it, and where we can, reverse it.
I'm C. Marie Ainsborough. Thank you for listening.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has scrapped a deal announced on Monday with the UN to relocate some 16,000 African migrants out of Israel, evidently bowing to domestic political pressure. Monday's deal aimed to find a home for thousands of majority male migrants fleeing Sudan and Eritrea who'd arrived in Israel in increasing numbers over the last decade. While half of some 35,000 migrants would have been relocated to Europe or Canada, half would have been given protected status in Israel, and that's where Netanyahu encountered pushback, including from his own political party. Immigration hardliners, including Israel's deputy foreign minister, have called African migrants in the country infiltrators who should not be rewarded with the title of refugees. And the Trump administration is pushing Canada and Mexico to be ready to announce the broad strokes of a deal to renegotiate NAFTA as early as next week, despite the fact that agreement has been reached on just 6 of the deal's 30 chapters. According to Bloomberg, administration officials want to announce progress on NAFTA at the Summit of the Americas in Peru next week. Talks to redo the 24-year-old trade deal have been ongoing since August and could probably drag on for many more months. But upcoming elections this summer in Mexico have dialed up the urgency. Mexico's top trade negotiator says unless a deal is finalized by the end of April, the country's legislature won't have enough time to review and vote on the deal before those elections. On Tuesday, President Trump took to Twitter to threaten that the U.S. would nix NAFTA if Mexico didn't stop migrants from reaching the U.S. or if Congress didn't fund a border wall. Trump's own trade negotiating team has repeatedly said tying the NAFTA deal to border wall funding is not a U.S. objective. Luke Vargas, the United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table, a West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. If you go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you'll notice the chat room link on the rightish of the page. Kelly Lincoln, our roaring girl, monitors that. Oh, and I should add, she will be at Netroots Nation 18. So, as some of our people who provide some content here on Netroots Radio, so visit with them if you happen to be out there and listen to Netroots Radio during Netroots Nation 18. We'll have coverage as we usually do. All right, so do contact the chat room if you have any concerns, questions, requests, etc., etc., etc. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of the homepage are the Contribute Donate buttons. Those are very important parts of the homepage because, well, it is your generosity that helps us pay our bills. We are unable to do it without you, and thank you for that. Follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. We're also on Facebook, so if you feel like going there, go there. And you can follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. And show notes and links are on a Daily Coast Diary that I post about 10 minutes before showtime during the week. And find me there as Justice Putnam. Fancy that. And music, once again, is provided by the fabulous and lovely Frances Livings. And if you happen to be in Southern California, she plays all over the Southland. And she has some upcoming dates. April 27th, I believe, is the most current big-time date that she'll have. And I'll give you more information on that tomorrow and Friday as the week winds down. So let's start with weather from around the world. And along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, it is currently 41 degrees. We're going to be a bit warmer than yesterday. Got a high slated of 72. I think we might inch a little bit higher than that where the mothership here in Rogue River, the town, the little village is. Let's see. Winds are currently out of the southwest, about 2 miles per hour. Will increase to 5 to 10 miles per hour out of the north later on to this morning. And then tonight they will be shifting from the west northwest at 5 to 10 miles an hour with gusts. And then tomorrow, small chance of rain overnight. And then tomorrow we are going to have rain, and they call them showers. And when we call them showers in the rainforest, monsoon to everybody else. Trust me. And the winds will be out of the east-northeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Right now, high pressure dominates at 30.05 inches. Visibility is at 10 miles. Humidity is 65%. Unfortunately, I have no data on air quality. How dare they? Alrighty, but weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these personal purchased weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people live around the world. London, 53 degrees with a rain shower. Paris, France, 56 with a rain shower. Rome, Italy, 65 and partly cloudy. Both Paris and Rome are under a thunderstorm watch for disruption of electrical grid and flooding. Kiev is 67 and fair. Kabul is 64 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 70 and fair. Tokyo is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 69 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 50 degrees and cloudy. And New York is 48 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people live around the world. Starting off here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays is quite a comprehensive article out of Think Progress by E.A. Crunden. I'll give most of the highlights here, but do check out my show notes and links diary on Daily Co's. You can find that I'm Justice Putnam, so that's one way to look for it. And, okay, so last week the Commerce Department announced that a citizenship question would be added to the upcoming decennial census for the first time in 70 years. The implications are stark for the entire country, but results could be dire for one state in particular, Texas. And California is up there too, and these are features, not bugs. The census is a constitutionally mandated project, one that meets a number of crucial national needs. But years of funding shortages, stalled efforts to upgrade its technology, and general leadership issues within the Census Bureau have thrown the 2020 project for a loop. Now, with a citizenship question on the line, it could burden the program and individual states even further. Now, Texas was already facing an undercount in the 2020 census, but experts and advocates say the citizenship question will likely exacerbate the problem. That means the second largest state in the country could soon find itself facing a major dilemma with ramifications for millions of people. Now, Texas stands to gain as many as 3 new congressional seats following the 2020 census, and of course, the right wing and a particular hostile foreign power, they don't like a lot of people voting. In fact, they don't like voting, period. If they have to put on the charade of voting, well, we'll put on the charade. But of course, it's a show. The state also relies on billions of dollars to fund programs like Medicare, to say nothing of infrastructure upgrades and other necessities. An accurate census count will ensure that funding continues, but at the moment, experts say that assurance is far from certain. Texas has at least 3 challenges facing it as it seeks a fair and accurate count to the 2020 census. Phil Sparks, who heads the nonpartisan census project, told Think Progress, and it is a matter of money and politics. A sweeping look at the census in Texas by the Texas Tribune last week indicated that Texans are already hard to count. Low-income residents, college students, and inhabitants in remote areas are only a few of the populations that pose a logistical challenge to enumerators. It's also pointed out that the state's rural population saying the internet is essential for the census to be fully effective, something that residents in the countryside don't always have. Another issue plaguing the count is internal displacement. Hurricane Harvey destroyed a large part of the Texas coast last fall, leaving the sprawling, densely populated city of Houston struggling to recover. It's just like how they terraformed New Orleans and got rid of the indigenous scourge that was there, displaced them, and everybody knows that real estate is much more valuable when it's unoccupied. But the problems pale in comparison to the citizenship question, an addition that could be a nightmare in Texas. Latinos and immigrants in Texas have been historically difficult to count, and to include a question on citizenship during a time when immigrants are living under one of the most anti-immigrant policies in the country will scare people from wanting to be counted. I got to tell you, it's a feature, not a bug. If an immigrant is fearful of being deported for answering a question on their legal status, Texas will be undercounted and underrepresented. I will add also that my stepdad, who was Japanese American and was incarcerated in a concentration camp, Census caught them up. Oh, did I mention they had to sell everything they had? They were running a little farm down near Dana Point, that area, now owned by the Irvine Company because it got sold to what became the Irvine Company for really pennies on the dollar. They were allowed to take a knife and fork and spoon each, a few plates, what they could fit in a suitcase. No furniture. Sell it all. Leave it. When they came back, too bad. And my stepdad fought admirably and was highly decorated in Italy and I believe Germany. And I'm suddenly having a brain lock. He was all over Europe, but highly decorated with a 442nd. But the census illegally used to track his family down. Oh, also his elderly dad died in the camp while my stepdad was fighting for the United States in Italy. So that was always nice. But with the census undercounting whole populations, we know what this is about. Texas is, I forget the term, but it's where, it's a majority-minority state, where people of color outnumber white residents. And 11% of all U.S. immigrants live in Texas. They account for approximately 17% of the state. And 1 in 6 Texas residents is an immigrant. Because we are a country of immigrants. Oh, I know that they took that out of government papers and whatnot. Isn't it weird that the human health services took breast cancer awareness and where to go and how to get tested off of their website? What's that all about? I guess women aren't voting for Trump, so why should he give them anything? I guess you'd only know that if you were really married to the guy. Seems like we are. Now, the census is meant to be nonpartisan, but controversy over the citizenship question is rapidly making the endeavor a political fault line. A number of conservative figures, including Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who should be in jail for securities fraud, requested the question prior to its implementation, and following confirmation that the question would be added, Ted Cruz lauded the move, calling it a common sense addition. Well, yeah, because he's here, you know. But contrast that with Democrat Beto O'Rourke, who's running against Cruz, who is from the border city of El Paso. He's taken a stark stance in opposition, adding a census question on citizenship is specifically intended to undercount communities with large immigrant populations. For El Paso, for Houston, for every community across our defining border state, that means a loss of millions in resources for healthcare, public education, infrastructure and transportation, disaster relief and preparedness, and the distribution of billions in federal funds critical to projects in Texas. Well, many advocates rallying against the question say supporters should consider the financial cost to all Texans. But I think that really, if people just got promised, white people got promised that, yeah, you'll be out of a job. I mean, these trade wars are killing you anyway financially, right? And all those brown people are, taking what you have worked really hard for, especially when you've been sitting on your butt using your thumb to change the TV from one Fox channel to another. As long as those people, even if they're losing everything, as long as they have some brown people to kick, they'll be happy.
Dansez maintenant sous l'été, les pieds nus dans le sable. Dansez maintenant et jetez vos ennuis dans les vagues qui dansent, balancent.
All right, quickly here, White House Budget Director Mick Mulvaney has made no secret of his dislike for the CFPB, and this is by Hannah Levantova out of Mother Jones. And as a congressman, he proposed legislation to eliminate the Bureau, calling it a sick, sad joke. Now he's calling it the very definition of tyranny. And he wants Congress to work the Bureau over when he's recommending 4 major changes to its structure, funding, and oversight that would vastly weaken the consumer watchdog. And that's what he's there. He's there to deconstruct the administrative state. And maybe he might be going to jail too. Might. But at least a report will be written. All right, that really brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but stay tuned for live content and breaking news throughout the day on Netroots Radio. And we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie d'un novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.